You know, it's going to be a really good podcast when you start crying and you haven't even started the podcast yet. Anyways, so welcome to the podcast. Um, I decided to do this podcast because I feel like there's a lot of things that I tend to talk about in some of the classes that are a little bit more personal, a little bit more like in terms of what I have learned on my biomechanics journey in conjunction with the things that I have experienced in my life. And so, instead of doing a lot of that in the classes, like full body flexibility, I thought, well, a podcast would be a great way to share some of these things with you. And you don't have to have a mat and like be in your workout clothes, and you can listen to it when you're just on the train or whatever you want to, whenever you want to listen to it, and if you want to listen to it. Yeah. But basically, for those of you who have been with me for a while, you kind of know what's going on with me, especially in terms of the inner child. We've done a lot of classes. I've released a one full class on my Instagram, which if those of you who are new, I recommend you watch that class. It's called The Introduction to the Inner Child, and that's actually on my Instagram, and that will give you the background for the inner child, what that concept means, the shadow psychology concept of the shadow or the inner child, how to discover it for yourself, how to start to relate to your inner child so that you can heal from, these deep wounds that we all have from childhood, and also heal, because you're healing those deeper wounds, be able to heal some of the wounds that you have potentially from being an adult and going through life shit of and there's much of it. I know, but anyway, so the topic for this podcast is going to be about love and about loss, and about how you always need to continue to get to know your inner child better, because it gives you more information about who you are as an adult, the demons that you fight against consciously or subconsciously on a daily basis, and some of those dysfunctional patterns of behavior that those demons cause in your romantic relationships, intimate relationships, friendships, work relationships, any type of relationship that you have with other human beings. And so something that I realized recently about my inner child that I didn't know before is that, as some of you know, a lot of my wounding of my inner child comes from my dad, comes from my father. My father is a very unconditionally loving family man, a provider, like full on provider, will do anything for his family, loves me unconditionally. But like typical Chinese or Asian family men, they're not so verbally expressive about their emotions. They're not very verbally affectionate or physically affectionate. So mainly my dad was, his love languages were like acts of service, gifts. Like, I was never want of money. He never made me feel like I needed anything. He would provide everything, right? And when I was very little, I was very close with my father. All children, when we're little, like when I go back to my diaries when I'm like 5 or 6, every diary entry is like, I miss you, mom and dad. I miss you, dad. I love you so much, dad. You're the best dad in the world. Every Father's Day, birthday, gifts, like, little cards I would draw, like the whole family, like with our dog. And but as I grew older, like that changed, that dynamic changed. But like in my mind, my dad was always like, I always had this image of him that he was on this pedestal for me. Like he was the most honest and kind and considerate and unconditionally loving figure, for me. And I realized that not everybody's family is different. Everybody's parents are different. Some people don't even have a father that they grew up with. I was very fortunate that I had a man like this in my life. But I understand that not everybody has that. And so I'm just saying that because, I don't want you to, if you didn't have a father figure like mine, like I don't want you to think that somehow, you know, that's not as good of a situation or something. Yeah, that's just what I grew up with. So, yeah, as I got older, like things changed between my father and I, and we stopped talking as much. I stopped sharing as much. He never really shared that much with me. But you become like a preteen and a teen, and you start to like keep things inside for yourself. My mom and I were, chatty Cathys all the time, but like my dad and I, we rarely chatted. And yeah, I mean, at some point we just stopped talking altogether, like about really anything other than the logistical things of daily life. And then what I realized is that, as an adult, is that I've missed my father. I'll show you guys some pictures actually of when my father and I were young. So that's my dad. He's very, very smart. He's an organic chemist. And he like was always extremely intelligent, much more than me, I think. This is not really focusing very well, but that's okay. But yeah, that's me and my dad. And so I realized as an adult that I've really missed my father. Like I've missed him for decades at this point. I've missed him all my life, it seems like. Anyway, my inner child really wants my father, really misses my father. Didn't realize that though, but in my adult relationships, I would subconsciously search for my dad. And I think this is pretty common, right? A lot of women like are attracted to men who are similar to their fathers. But it's not always the case, but yeah, it's pretty common. And I for one definitely like, I've always been attracted to men who are similar to my father. And yeah, the problem with that is that I could never really see a man for who he was, what he could bring to the table, like on his terms, how he wanted to love me. I could only see a man for how he compared to my father. This was all subconscious, just FYI. And so that was one of the major reasons why my relationships never worked out. And this last relationship that I had with my ex, he was, from the get-go, in my opinion, the most similar to my father out of anyone that I had met. And that's one of the reasons why I fell so hard in love with him. And he was also my dance partner, so I needed him. He provided, right, the opportunity for me to go after my dreams. And that was something that, like, again, is something that I felt like was my dad would have supported my dreams in any way, shape, or form, Maybe he would even put on dance shoes and be my partner if I really needed him to do it. But anyway, so the problem was I couldn't see my ex for who he really was. Both the good and the not so good and everything in between. And from the first inner child introductory class that I did, you guys know that, part of my inner child was always very afraid of making mistakes, especially in front of my father. And as an adult, we grow these defense mechanisms to deal with the fears of our inner child. So I became very arrogant, right? I could never be wrong in front of my ex. That arrogance led to a disconnect between us, made him feel, you know, like he wasn't important, his feelings, his opinions, his thoughts, etc. And then subconsciously, I always compared him to my dad. So all the ways in which he wasn't fulfilling, the requirements that I felt like my dad fulfilled, right? Like it would trigger me. And so I would have all of these outbursts, especially in the first year or two of our relationship, because of the subconscious triggering that was happening, because I was subconsciously always comparing him with my dad. And so in a way, I was very unfair, right? Like as a partner. And so, I couldn't see all the good things because I was like, well, it's not quite similar to what my dad had, right? And that's because I missed my father. I was searching for him, I didn't, there was so much wounding in that relationship. And it's interesting because some of my clients and I have talked about this a lot, but basically, sometimes wounding doesn't happen because of some crazy traumatic event. Sometimes oftentimes wounding happens just like this insidious, very slow, very gradual disconnection between two people over time, like what I had with my father. Like for the last decade or so, I haven't even really spoken to my dad. I don't even know what his phone number is. This year, actually, this past year, we didn't speak on my birthday. I know he knows my birthday, but we just didn't talk. I don't call him. He comes only like maybe 2 times or 3 times a year to visit my mom and me. So yeah, just very, very disconnected. Like some of you who have really close relationships with your fathers might be like, whoa, that's so strange, But that was my normal, and I didn't realize how much I was hurting because of that until recently, Anyway, so back to my relationship. You guys know that my ex was my husband, and he was also my dance partner. And he was the most important man in my life, but I subconsciously compared him to my father, and that led to a lot of disconnect, right? But it was also, like my ex was not perfect. Recently, on Thanksgiving, I ran into him with our pro-am student, that we had been teaching together for quite some time in the beginning. Anyway, and long story short, I found out that they had been together and he had been cheating on me since 2021, maybe even earlier. And I had no idea. I had no idea. Now, I know I'm saying this and it feels like, Jess, why are you airing out your dirty laundry? And it's not about pointing fingers. Like I literally just spent the first part of the class telling you like what I contributed to the disconnect between him and I, right? And I've watched, I know that I've watched enough Esther Perel to know that cheating is a symptom, right? But nonetheless, there was a severe level of deception on his end that lasted for more than 2 years. And I had zero idea. Like I even had a friend who tried to tell me last year, and I rejected that possibility so hard that she and I like estranged for a year. That was one of my best friends because I couldn't imagine that he would do something like that. I didn't even think that that would happen, like didn't even cross my mind. And part of the reason, but there were so many things that like didn't kind of match up in terms of what he said and how he behaved, and the disingenuity that was there like all the time in the last 2 years of our relationship. I just couldn't make sense of it on like a heart level. It bothered me, but I still never allowed myself to like consider that possibility, right? And so part of the reason why I couldn't see my ex for who he was also in terms of the bad things, is because in my mind, I was still like comparing him to my father. I was like, well, I fell in love with you because you are kind and honest and loyal, just like my father, and in an unconditional, right, in your love, just like my father would be. There's no way you would do that to me. There's no way, right? And I couldn't see him for who he really was and what he was potentially feeling, doing, not doing in front of me, behind my back. Like, I couldn't see any of that because my inner child was so afraid that he wouldn't be like my father that I imprinted like my own fantasy and my own picture of who he was in my brain and made myself believe that the whole time. Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because I was speaking to one of my clients and she told me, she said, isn't it interesting that you've been working on yourself and you've been doing so much healing with your inner child? And then the universe decided that it was time for you, because you were ready to see the truth, right? Because I don't know what, I was already at rock bottom after we split and after my marriage ended. But can you imagine if I was at rock bottom after we split and after we marriage ended, and I had known the reason was because of the fact that he was with someone else, right? Like I think I don't know. I'm really, really strong and I probably would have gotten through it, but I probably would have like self-destructed and been in a very dangerous, life-threatening situation, right? Because I wasn't ready. Yeah, it would have been so shocking and so painful that I don't think I would have survived it. But now, having done a little bit of healing and I've seen my inner child, it's like the universe said, you're ready to see the truth. Let me show you the truth. Because Central Park, guys, is massive. It's massive. And we literally like walked right to each other, like towards each other on the same sidewalk, in the same part of the park, that same place, the same time. I saw them and they were holding hands. And then of course we talked afterwards and there was this whole thing where I found out the truth, but I couldn't see my ex for who he was. I really couldn't. I'm still grappling with that because I'm still working to heal my inner child. And the point is I don't want to harp on this whole experience with my ex and, what happened to me. As much as I want to tell you guys about what you need to do in order to build a better foundation for more authenticity, connection, and happiness in your life and in your relationships. I asked on the day before Thanksgiving, I asked my mom for my dad's email and phone number. On Thanksgiving, I messaged him, "Happy Thanksgiving and I miss you." And then when the thing happened, when I found out about my ex, and I emailed my dad, and I literally said to him, like, I've never spoken to him, like, I mean, the email that I sent on Thanksgiving to say Happy Thanksgiving was like the first time I had reached out to him in like years, right? But the next email that I sent to my dad, I'd never ever spoken to him like that ever in my whole life. And I said, "Hi, Dad. I'm going to skip some of it. Yesterday, I found out that blah, 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 blah. I thought Daniel was a good person, but I don't think that he was fully who I imagined him to be. I wanted you to know because the reason why I trusted him so much was because I always thought men I was with would be like you. In my eyes, you are the most kind and loyal and honest man. I miss you a lot, and I've been searching for you in some way in all the men I have dated. It's why I was so blind and I couldn't see what kind of person they really were. Daniel seemed to be so much like you in the beginning, but turned out he was not like you. He is his own person. And then I said a few other things. I said, I love you, Dad, and I miss you. So, anyways, this is what I mean by the work that we have to do to heal our inner child, because it's not easy. You know, reaching out to my dad, crying these kind of tears, it's not easy. And we avoid it. I didn't even realize how much I missed my dad. I didn't realize that for years and years. But then these subconscious things that our inner child, goes through affects our relationships. And like I said, I don't want to harp on what happened to me, right? It's not about pointing fingers at myself or him, right? Or each other. It's just about learning to interact with your pain in this way, where you really go really deep inside yourself and you seek to understand what dysfunctional behavior patterns in my relationships am I prone to, and why, and how do I address that? Because as I said, like, we all go through pain. Like, some of you might listen to my story and be like, that happened to me. That happened to me more than once. Or that happened to a friend of mine. That happened to someone I know, right? And some of you might listen to this and say, girl, you were lucky. You got a good end of it, Like, what happened to me was so much worse. And the thing is, I've spoken, yes, I am young, but I've spoken to enough clients of different ages, different backgrounds, in all different parts of the world, that I know, like, shit happens. Life is so hard. And it's sometimes I feel like, oh, I wish I was 6 years old in my dad's arms again. Because adult life is like freaking, yeah, it's not easy. So we all go through pain and we all go through shit. And the question is, how do you interact with this pain? Because the thing is, pain will go away. Just like if you have an injury, right? Like, the wound is going to heal with time, but some wounds heal badly. They leave a really bad scar, right? And you feel it, like, every time you try to do this or you try to do that, you can feel the wound. And sometimes if you interact with that healing process really, really well, right, that wound will heal. And yeah, there will always be a scar there, but that scar won't bother you. It'll be something that, like, you do whatever you want to do and you don't feel that scar is, like, inhibiting you. And so that's what I mean by interacting with your pain, because the pain is going to go away no matter what. But if we don't interact with it, we won't change systematically. We won't change in our system. Our system will fundamentally stay the same, and therefore you will repeat the same pattern, because that's what I did in all my long-term relationships, and hopefully never again, right? Because I did love my ex. I still do. And he was the most important man in my life, because he was not just my husband and my family, he was also my dance partner. And you guys know how much I love to dance. And so when you lose something that you really care about and you hit rock bottom, right? Like I said, there's only 3 things that can potentially, and I say potentially, promote change in a system. That is hitting rock bottom, right? That's number 1, but we don't really want to do that, but it happens. True love, which is what I had for the first time in my life. Or an ultimate curiosity about something, like my passion for dance, my curiousness about biomechanics, right? Those are the three things that could potentially change someone deep inside. And I experienced all three things almost at the same time, right? When my relationship ended. So how we interact with our pain by going deep, trying to no longer repress our inner child, but bring her or him into our present, into ourselves in the present, embracing them, figuring out what they look like, what is it that they need, giving them what they need, right? And my inner child needs to know that it's okay for her not to make mistakes and not be perfect. We've talked about that before. I've shared that before. And my inner child also needs my father. And I'm very fortunate because my father is still alive and I can reach out to him and we can repair our relationship. And but not everybody has that. And I know that that's really hard. But let me tell you something from my experience with other clients. The inner child work is something you do inside of yourself for yourself. Like, even if my dad was no longer here on this earth, the fact that I'm able to say to myself, I love my dad and I miss my dad very much, is already the healing that needs to happen. It's already the healing that will make a difference. So, but of course, it's much more rounding and wholesome and fulfilling when you can actually share those feelings that you've admitted to yourself with the person, right? But I know that once I heal my relationship with my father, I'm going to be able to have a good, healthy partnership, relationship, friendship, whatever it is with other people, much more than I used to. Why? Because I'm not operating based on fear, which is from the wounding of your inner child that hasn't healed. I won't look at a man and be afraid that he's not going to end up like my dad. I'm going to look at him and say, this is who you are. I accept who you are. I don't accept who you are, right? And I'm not going to be subconsciously comparing you to anybody else. I'm going to be comparing you to you, right? And I'm going to be able to treat them fairly and also treat myself fairly, because I don't deserve to settle for someone who isn't right for me, just because my inner child is flipping out, right? um, and so, you have to take care of your inner child. You have to embrace your inner child. When your inner child feels safe, you will feel safe. When your child feels happy, you're going to feel happy. And when you embrace your inner child, you're going to have this self-love that is so pervasive and authentic that you're not gonna need love. You're gonna prefer to be in love for sure, and you're gonna choose love if it comes your way, whether that's the kind of love you desire or not, but you're not gonna need it. It's not gonna be something that makes you afraid if you don't have it. And when we make decisions based on fear, the outcome is always bad. It's always bad. So you've got to find a way to eliminate that fear so that you can make, things can be a free will choice, not a need. Anyway, I think I did pretty well with the time today because I didn't want it to be more than like 30 minutes or so, 30, 40 minutes. But anyways, it's a rough time in my life. I'm just very, very happy because I found a dance partner who is very compatible with me. And I think that the next podcast I'm going to do will be about like dancing and all of that. But it's not, for those of you who don't dance, that's okay, because what I'm going to talk about are things that, will apply to whatever it is that you're going for, whether it's dancing or something else. But it's just going to probably be about, overcoming self-doubt, overcoming doubt that comes from others. you know, dance is my great love, the great love of my life. And it's been the most, it's been my greatest teacher. So we'll get into that next time. I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. Sorry for the many tears, but you know, I like to keep it real, especially, you know, with you guys. Bye.